Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. I found this apartment on my university's renters and campus living bulletin board. It was just off campus, a 2-bedroom apartment, and from the photos looked spacious and clean. It was also only $300 a month, including utilities. I should have paid closer attention to that note though. It said that I would not be able to meet my flatmate at all because he worked the night shift at the hospital and spent the days sleeping, so I must keep out of his room. This sounded fine to me at the time. So I texted the number and we arranged a time for me to move in. I know, I should have viewed it first, but I had just broken up with my girlfriend, and I did not want to be living at campus so close to her dorm. The first week was great. I would come home to a quiet apartment, get some studying done, cook a meal, and go to bed. I would hear my flatmate leave early in the morning, but true to his word, I never actually saw him. It started on the 7th night. The groans, the mewling. I assumed my flatmate had a cat. I texted him regarding the noises the next day, asking if he could keep his cat quiet at night. He responded by saying that he had no cat. The sounds continued for a whole week more before I got really annoyed. When I texted my flatmate again, he insisted he did not know what I was talking about. I was starting to feel gaslit and deeply unsettled. So last night, when the sound started, I went to check on what they were. His rules be damned. I knew he would be at his shift, so I just walked to his bedroom door and slammed through the door in anger. What I found there is a sight I will never ever forget for as long as I live. The room was full of bodies attached to the walls with hooks. And then to my horror, I realized that they were all still alive. They were people who were being fed through tubes with refuse tubes attached to them too. But this wasn't even the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was that each one of these bodies on the wall was an exact replica of me. Needless to say, I left the flat at that very moment. The next day, the police went to investigate the flat and found nothing. The super told them that no one had lived there for 3 years since the last owner died. So who have I been texting with? Who is it that just sent me the message? You ruined the surprise. Now I'll have to make you another one. Story 2. Lately, I've been wondering about Jesse, my best friend. I'm not so sure he is my best friend anymore, although technically we still are. But I don't feel like I know him anymore. We're at our old hangout, the park. It's dark and deserted now. Jesse's dark, slim form seems to blur in with the darkness as he lounges against the fence, watching me. I can feel his eyes burning into me. I try to grasp, how had it come to this? Just a few short months ago, we'd been inseparable, doing stuff together, hanging out, sharing jokes and escapades and whatnot, and music. Rock music to be exact. Listening to our favorite bands, messing around on cheap guitars, trying to lure in anyone who had access to a drum kit, making up songs and dreaming of making it big. Not that we were fanatical about it or anything. It was just fun. But that changed when we met Tony Ridge one night at a local gig. Tony's a roadie, and he knows all the local bands. But even more than that, he's totally immersed in the whole history of rock. I mean, the most obscure corners of rock history. Unheard of bands, unsuspected genres and all. As I say, that one night he got talking to us about all that stuff, and it proved fatal. That is to say, his enthusiasm for woefully neglected rock music geniuses rubbed off on me. And not on Jesse. Not one bit on Jesse. He didn't take much part in the conversation, and I thought at the time he was just too busy listening. But maybe I should have taken the trouble to actually notice his expression. The first intimation I had that our friendship was no longer perfect was when we were leaving the gig. Dude, was that fucking boring or what? Jesse remarked. What was fucking boring? That Tony guy. Who gives a fuck about all that shit? I stopped to stare at him, and he looked back over his shoulder at me. Well, like I said, that night proved fatal for me. I started researching all manner of obscure bands as much as I could, rhapsodizing about all these sadly neglected musical geniuses down the ages and disdaining any band who'd had even a whiff of commercial success as irredeemable sellouts. Looking back, I can see that I was over the top about it, but I thought that my best friend might have been a little more accommodating. The way I saw it, I was just trying to do him a good turn, get him to look outside the mainstream, expand his musical horizons and all. Shut up, Mike, he would say, as soon as I got going on my favorite subject, and soon started adding some more choice epithets as well. I'm just trying to educate you, dude, I would reply. Rather unwisely, I can see that now. I don't want to be fucking educated. I should have left it at that. But the trouble was, I was pretty much a zealot at that time, and Jesse was my obvious and only target, as I really didn't have any other friends who were into rock. Soon, he started avoiding me. I got plenty of unsolicited advice from other people on the subject of our friendship, the gist of which was, wind your neck in or you're gonna drive him away altogether. Even my mom, who I thought hadn't cared over much for Jesse anyway, chipped in on the subject. Some also pointed out that friendships can run their natural course, but for some reason, I couldn't let it go. I don't know what demon had gotten into me. Well, partly it was Tony's fault. I still talked to him at gigs. I had taken to going on my own, and he advised me that Jesse might come around in time. Next thing was Tony turned up missing. No. One seemed to know what might have become of him. Incidentally, this was after one night at a gig when Jesse had been seen hanging around as well. Though he didn't want to be seen with me. That was just a few days ago. Tony's still missing. So it finally has come to this. A meeting at the park, one of our favorite haunts in the old days. I'd asked him to come and meet me here to try for a reconciliation. Also, my fervor had worn off, and I really missed the old days of us messing around and not taking anything seriously. Not even music. I should have known better. About trying to reconcile, I mean, like my former religious zeal, it's obvious from the outset that Jesse is having none of it. I'm done, man, he says. You pretty much literally bored me to death. Do you think I'd want to risk that happening again with whatever stupid fucking crazy shit you decide to take up next? That's harsh, I say. It was only music. Don't take it to extremes. You just wouldn't leave me alone. It's all over. Seriously, I plead. I'm sorry, man. Yeah, so am I. And I bet Tony was pretty sorry too. Tony? Tony Ridge? Yeah, he started it all. That turns me cold. Shit, man. What the fuck have you done? He smiles. Nothing to what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do you a good turn. No doubt, I should have been hightailing it out of there at that point. But I remain watching him, in a way hypnotized, and certainly curious to know just what he means. You remember what you said? You were just trying to do me a good turn. So, my voice is almost shaking, but I still go on standing there. So I'm just gonna return the favor. You remember what else you said? I couldn't. All those stupid obscure bands and their stupid fucking obscure songs. You said once that you wanted a playlist of them at your funeral, and not the usual obvious mainstream crap that most people go for. In fact, you said that was what you wished for more than anything else. My mouth drops open. He smiles again. I'll make sure you get your wish. Surely he's just joking. But then I see the knife in his hand. Too late. A dull feeling like a gut. Punch, then the sensation of something warm and sticky. Blood, no doubt. He's already gone. I'm wishing something else devoutly right now. That I hadn't helped to turn my best friend into a psychopath. Story 3. When you're in the business as long as I've been, you're bound to see some messed up shit. Trust me, I've seen it all. An unfaithful husband, angering his wife to the point where she commits a murder. Suicide? Check. A young woman pushed into the path of an incoming train by an obsessive stalker. Check. My sister was pierced by thousands of toothpicks, which caused the killer to so aptly call her the human hedgehog. Check. As you can probably tell, it's that last case that I'm dealing with currently, trying to figure out how the hell the killer managed to get away with it. I mean, if you think about it, nothing adds up. For starters, the toothpicks had to have been inserted at a secondary location, prior to her being transported and left for dead at the park where she was found, all without any witnesses. And then comes the question of the toothpicks themselves. The paramedics at the scene found it impossible to move her, as it would drive the toothpicks further into her skin, increasing the blood loss. Well, I actually did have an answer for that question, but it was something I didn't want to think about. The toothpicks were probably inserted one at a time. Over a period of several months, possibly years, let the wound heal, and then move on to the next toothpick, which brings me to my final dilemma. Why? What did the killer gain spending months of their time piercing the skin of my sister? Why was it my sister in the first place? I don't know of any reason it would be an act of revenge, so it may have been a murder of opportunity, just pure chance. It was my sister, which made it hurt even more. It was definitely a shock discovering she was still alive after all these years, and seeing how she was treated only added salt to the wound. I was grieving, yes, but the killer mentioned that my sister would only be the beginning, and so solving this case would be my utmost priority. I couldn't let this happen again. True grief could come later, and so I sat in my office, sliding her my sister's watch over my wrist and milling over these facts, with the first step to discovering the killer currently in my hands. A day after the killings occurred, a birthday card containing an address was mailed directly to me. Forensic work indicated that the handwriting on it perfectly matched the note left at the crime scene. While getting a handwritten birthday card was interesting in itself, it still raised a lot more questions. How did the killer know I took up the case? Were they at the crime scene that night? Maybe they knew it was my sister that they had killed, and were now targeting me. As usual, nothing made sense. But still, an address was an address. And in my line of work, you take notes like that very seriously. I thumbed over the birthday card again, looking at the cartoon giraffe telling me to have a tall someday. Yeah, birthday card puns are strange. I analyzed the address inside again, looking at the word 12 Bakerstead, as if they may have some hidden meaning that I hadn't discerned yet. Nothing came to me. It looked like the address was just that, an address. And so I coordinated with my supervisor to lead a team that evening down at Bakerest to see if we could anything down there. I was secretly hoping that we wouldn't, and that this was just a wild goose chase, as I was terrified of what I would find down there, if that was not the case. Later that evening, I showed up at 12 Baker Street with 3 of the finest men I knew. Thompson, a mountain of a man, who I knew firsthand could keep a level head in any situation. Ramirez, not physically impressive as Thompson, but he had the brains to make up for it. His quick wit was known to save many a cop from danger. And Edison, an analyst both in the field and out, he somehow finds a way to keep one eye on every detail. I picked the best of the best to deal with the worst of the worst. Baker Street itself was a row of warehouse buildings in the industrial district, on the outskirts of town. All the warehouses were exactly the same, large, rectangular, and made up of red brick and mortar. Almost half of the warehouses were still in production, manufacturing different materials to be shipped across the globe, while the other half looked abandoned. 12 Baker Street was one of them. It had the signature, "There's nothing worth looking at here." Look, smashed windows, rubbish piled around the outside, bricks crumbling in a few odd spots, and doors set slightly of their hinges. But this was the place. I set my jaw and motioned to the others while slowly making my way through the already open front door. It took a while for my eyes to adjust to the dark interior, as I was opposed to using a torch in that moment. I could hear the unmistakable sound of water dripping from the ceiling into a hollow object nearby. The air seemed thick and musty, smelling largely of wet cardboard, and something more metallic, blood. A tangy smell that quickly invades the nostrils while leaving no room for other smells. I pushed on, my crew keeping pace behind me. Edison looked at me with a raised eyebrow, and I nodded to him in return. "This is the place," I had silently told him. "Be ready for anything." We passed through another set of doors and came into a room dimly lit by an overhead light. And in the middle of the room, basking in the light, there was a person. And I say person very lightly. The average person has a neck 15 inches long, measuring from shoulder to chin. The person before me had a neck over 10 times that length. They were on their hands and feet, their neck sprouting from their shoulders like a vine and curling downwards. Their neck continued across the floor for about 5 more feet before ending with a neck attached to it. The person saw us and began to slowly shuffle towards us, slowly dragging their head and massive neck along with them. They moaned mournfully as they moved. As they moved forward, their blood fell to the ground, spilling in all directions and leaving a bright red trail wherever they went. The person groaned again and looked up at us, obviously in tremendous pain. "What the hell is that?" Ramirez said loudly from behind me. I kept my gaze focused towards the person, towards him as closer inspection revealed. I don't know. Another animal-themed abomination by the looks of it. I stood my ground and watched, unsure of what to do as he heaved his neck and the rest of his body towards us. They made eye contact with me and moved their mouth as if to speak, but all that came out were more ghastly groans. I understood what he was trying to say anyways. His mouth shaped like a circle, an opening and closing, enunciating a one-syllable word. "Help!" I stepped back, out of fear more than anything else. I knew that this thing couldn't necessarily do anything to harm me, but in the back of my mind, alarm bells were going off. This is unnatural. People shouldn't look like that. You need to leave. Now. I could sense my team behind me tensing up and shuffling backwards, probably going through the same thought process as I was. Fear is the primary motivator in a person, after all. The person continued to crawl forward, further extending the trail of blood behind him. His movements more slow and haggard. His life essence seemed to be dripping away from him. And it was obvious I was watching the final moments of someone tortured to the point of death. Once again, a voice began to speak. It emanated from above us, broken and distorted, probably coming from some sort of PA system. It was calm and somewhat cheerful in the way it spoke, as if everything going on was just a normal occurrence. "Welcome, all visitors, to the newest attraction to the human zoo. A lovely giraffe created with larger, more appropriate pieces of meat." I winced. That did not sound pretty. A slow process, yes. But look at the end result. Isn't he beautiful? Undoubtedly much better than his original form. Wouldn't you agree, Jonathan? I looked up almost instinctively. That was my name. Anyways, I just wanted to say a big thank you for volunteering a rather fine subject to add to my collection. I just know you'll enjoy the wonderful things I have in store for you. The voice stopped speaking, and I became aware of 2 things at once. A sharp, loud noise of metal striking metal that was over just as it began came from the far right-hand side on the other side of the room. A gunshot, and to my left, Thompson's leg seemed to jerk backwards, causing him to keel over and fall on top of himself, red spurting from an area just above his knee. A bullet wound. I did the one thing anyone faced with an unseen gunman in a room would do. Duck and dive for cover. Fear is a primary motivator after all, and I was scared shitless. I found myself behind a stack of boxes, which to my best guess was blocking the gunner's line of view. I stood still, chest heaving from adrenaline and fear, and assessed the situation. Thompson was lying on the ground, unmoving. He must have hit his head on the way down. Edison was directly to my right, having chosen the same pile of boxes to hide behind as me. Ramirez was unaccounted for, and we had a gunman on the loose. It wasn't looking good. And then the overhead light turned off. Nothing makes your heart beat faster than the panic of suddenly being thrust into darkness. I heard the patter of footsteps ahead of me, close to where Thompson lay. It could have been Ramirez, looking to help him, or the gunner, looking to finish the job. I hoped it was Ramirez. I heard more footsteps. Heavier. Louder. More than one person. I contemplated making a dash for Thompson, grabbing him and getting the hell out of there, but he was too heavy for that. I turned to Edison to see if he had any idea what to do when the light turned back on. I looked at my surroundings. The graph man was on the floor, unmoving. Ramirez was slumped over a box on the far side of the room, dead or close to it. Thompson was gone. The gunner was gone. Edison helped me carry Ramirez back to our vehicle. He had bruises all over his body, from what looked to be a fistfight, but he was still breathing for the most part. I couldn't say the same for the graph. Man, however, we had the rest of the warehouse swept, but nothing came up at all. It had apparently been cleaned of all evidence beforehand, in preparation of our arrival, or never even used at all. It was hard to fathom it all. I had lost Thompson, and come back with a man with a 25-foot-long neck instead. Thompson was out there, looking like God knows what. Ramirez was in hospital, badly beaten. Edison was shaken up, understandably. I was scared, but it was the words spoken out of that PA. A system that bothered me the most, the way that they said the graph. Man's neck was made up of much larger pieces of flesh, as if they had more humans with them, and judging by the size of the neck, a lot more than one. There were people still out there, besides Thompson. A lot more people.